Court, Milton Keynes City Centre, MK9 3EL.
As a young Muslim growing up in the UK, I know firsthand the struggles of preserving your deen in modern society. But, ayyuha al-ikhwa, my dear brothers, do not despair, for Allah does not burden a soul more than it can handle, and He appoints His toughest trials to His strongest servants. Join me, Muhammad Salim, as we explore the divine Islamic wisdom from our great book and our great Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that will help us confront the core issues facing our youth.
اخترت يوما وأنت تقرأ القرآن، لماذا اختار الله عز وجل حرف السين في سورة الناس وحرف الغين في قوله تعالى متحدثا عن هلاك فرعون وأغرقنا آل فرعون؟ وما الحكمة من قراءة المعوذتين مرتين باليوم؟ كونوا معي لنتعرف على جمال وبلاغة القرآن وسر لغة الضاد. ذلك سيبث كل يوم أربعاء من الساعة 1:30 وحتى 2 ظهرا. ابقوا معي، أنا آمال وهالة.
For a list of all our sponsors, please visit ramadanfm.com.
Ramadan, 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 87.9 FM.
Welcome to the Ramadan Reading Retreat with Aisha, Rumaisa and Sherza.
Flip away from life's distractions, grab a cup of tea, and let's delve into this week's cozy conversations.
Come on in.
Hello everyone and welcome to Ramadan Reading Retreat with me, Sherza, and my co-hosts Aisha and Rumaisa. So last week we talked a little bit about reading as transformational in previous weeks, and this week's theme is reading in the modern age. Now, what do we mean by reading in the modern age? Well, during week 1, we did talk about all the different reasons why people maybe choose to pick up a book or why people do read. And those reasons included things like that it's educational and opens you up to more ideas, it's relaxing, it's really interesting to get insight into other people's lives, into other people's cultures, and just find out more about things. And reading something that's existed since maybe like the dawn of time, like that's how we pass information from one generation to the next, crucial information that we need to keep maybe society running. And sometimes word of mouth does get skewed, and we even know, like, we're all students. When we listen to a lecture, we make notes to read back. So it's such an important tool. But what I thought was really interesting was that reading has been shown to decrease loneliness. And this has been particularly maybe important during the pandemic, which is why stats have kind of showed that reading has really surged during lockdown, and whether that's because people maybe have more time to kind of go back to old hobbies, or whether that's because it does decrease loneliness is of course up for debate. But yeah, it does decrease like loneliness and allows people to maybe feel more part of a community and kind of spend that time in maybe in a more productive way. So other things that are to do with maybe reading in the modern age is kind of the move from reading in books, like actual physical books, to maybe e-readers or audiobooks. And of course we will talk a bit more about that, since it is a bit of a controversial topic, and we will be discussing that in the second half of our show. We'll also hear from a very popular bookstagrammer. Now, for those who don't know what a bookstagrammer is, it's someone who has an Instagram account that's dedicated to books, dedicated to kind of book reviews and encouraging people to read. And that's something, of course, that didn't exist maybe 20, 30 years ago. So we got a really exclusive interview from ZubsCovered, which we'll be going into later on in the show. But let's just start off with this week's books of the week. Actually, we decided to do 2 books this week. And the books we chose for this week were a bit different from previous weeks. So the books we chose for this week had a series of short essays or a series of short stories in them. And we thought this kind of tied in with the theme of reading in the modern age, because as we kind of move to maybe a busier life and a faster paced lifestyle, a lot of people have started reading maybe summaries of books or just shorter and simple information. So we thought we would do like short stories this week, and the first book we actually did, Rumaisa would tell us more about, but it's to do with maybe Islam in the modern age. So I'll pass it over to Rumaisa. I don't want to say too much, and we'll talk about this week's books of the week.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So this week we, as Sherza mentioned, we have 2 books of the week, as it's nice special surprise for you guys. So one book is called Once Upon an Eid, and the second book is called Traveling Home. So maybe we'll start off with Once Upon an Eid. So Once Upon an Eid is a collection of short stories edited by Aisha Saeed and S.K. Ali. And we decided to focus in on one of the stories this week called Donut Break Tradition by S.K. Ali. And we decided to choose this book this week as, of course, we are sadly halfway through Ramadan, over halfway through, and at this time, we start looking towards Eid. So we thought this would be a nice book for the week. So the story Donut Break Tradition opens with the words, "It's Eid, but it doesn't feel like Eid." This is a short story about a family with a lot of heart. It's Eid, but for Nadia, an 11-year-old who has been through a really tough time recently, it doesn't feel like it. Her mother is quite ill, and despite the cheerful personalities of her dad and her brother in particular, who always try and look towards the positives, it seems like colour has left the house. While the others are away at Eid prayer, Nadia tries to recreate her family's Eid tradition of getting special bakery Eid donuts. Slowly, there is a gradual shifting in the mood, and we realize this will perhaps become one of the most special and memorable Eids in Nadia's life. So I thought this was a really heartwarming story, and it fits in really well into this book, which is essentially a collection of short stories kind of written targeting the kind of children's market or the family reading market. And a lot of the stories in this collection are sort of a little bit lighthearted or humorous, but this one has a bit of a serious message as well. And you really get the impression that, it's those small things that make Eid what it is. And as well as that, it's people that make Eid. And of course, over the last year with the COVID pandemic and the kind of consequences of that, for this year, Eid will be a lot different for a lot of families compared to how it is usually. So I wanted to ask you guys, what makes Eid for you? Do you guys have any special Eid traditions? Is there anything special you do as a family on Eid?
Yeah, so we kind of have a similar tradition to maybe the character in this book. So every morning my mum makes like savigny. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but it's basically like rice pudding, but instead of like rice, it's like these like long spaghetti looking things. It's really nice. It's like a sweet dish. So we have that for breakfast usually. And then we go to the mosque and do Eid prayer. And then on the way back home, we always stop at like Costa. And I don't know why it's Costa and why it's not some like maybe other chain of coffee, but it's always been Costa for years and years. And we stop there and we go in with our full Eid clothes and we sit there and we have like brunch sort of. So it's like coffee and like paninis and stuff. It's basically just because I guess my mum needs time to like when we go home and cook, and we're probably hungry at that point. But we always like stop at Costa and kind of grab a bite to eat before going home, and that's like kind of our Eid tradition. What about you, Aisha?
So yeah, obviously like food is such a big thing on Eid, but for us like decorating our house, and we always do Eid together as a family at our grandma's house. Obviously like circumstances haven't allowed for that, but yeah, we'd love to go and like just decorate we do our house first and then we go to our grandma's and then like we decorate her whole house too, so that when our extended family come at breakfast time, like after Eid Salat, that they can like see all the decorations and stuff. And it's just great just to like kind of take part in that tradition. And like Ramaisa was saying earlier, it really is like the importance of upholding those little things and making Eid just as much as it feels like Eid, like visually, and those like little things that you do can really just make you feel better, especially in these circumstances as well. And then one thing that I really like just about the character from this story is that you really like can appreciate her like akhlaq, like just her character. Like she's like caring for her mother and she's like respectful of her elders as well. So like if people are looking for a really helpful text for their children, especially if you know that they might be dealing with grief and they're really young. This is like such a great little short story just to get them, maybe like if they can't express their emotions and stuff, maybe they can identify some similarities with the character from this story. But yeah, I went off on a little bit of tangent, but overall, Eid traditions are always such a win.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's so many films and things like, for example, that are centering around Christmas, for example, but there isn't that much media or like films or books that center around Eid as an experience and kind of normalize it. So I think having this book would be a really good idea to get for any, younger readers, younger children, or to read like as a family. And even maybe, as an Eid gift, I would really, really recommend it. And I really related to what you said, especially shares about your Eid routine. We have a very similar kind of Eid schedule in our family. And I think over time for us, Eid traditions have changed because growing up in Ireland, there wasn't always like a local mosque nearby, and there weren't things like shops where you can get like mithai or gulab jamun or special foods on Eid. So on Eid we would often drive several hours from wherever we were into the capital, into Dublin, and try and spend Eid over there, go to the mosque over there, and then visit friends who lived around Dublin. And as well as that, like we don't have very much family in Ireland or Scotland either. So calling up our relatives is always a big part of even just speaking to them on the phone. And I think, this year when maybe, there might be people we might have lost touch with, not seeing them so often, just during lockdown, I think it would be really good to try and reach out to them and reach out to those people who maybe have lost a loved one or might be suffering due to the COVID pandemic in any other way as well. So moving on from that, our second book of the week was called Traveling Home by Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad. And I'll just read a short description from the kind of promotional material about this book, and then we'll get into discussing it. So this is described as a forceful study of Islamophobia in Europe in an age of populism and pandemic, considering survival strategies for Muslims on the basis of Quran, Hadith, and the Islamic theological, legal, and spiritual legacy. How should we react to the new Islamophobic movements now spreading in the West? Everywhere the far right is on the march, with nationalist and populist parties thriving on the back of popular anxieties about Islam and the Muslim presence. Hijab and minaret bans, mosque shootings, hostility to migrants, and increasingly scornful media stereotypes seem to endanger the prospects for friendly coexistence and the calm uplifting of Muslim populations. So for people familiar with the Sheikh's work, this book has essentially been developed as essays from lectures that the Sheikh has given over the past few years. And in this academic text, the Sheikh essentially makes a diagnosis of some of the reasons we're in the current condition we're in and provides some solutions out of it. And as mentioned, the book kind of tackles issues such as nationalism, Islamophobia, and politics through a kind of spiritual, Islamic, and wisdom-based lens, I would say. So just to provide a kind of summary of the book, he kind of starts off by explaining what Europeanness is and the development of a European identity. He also defines Islamophobia as a kind of anti-Islam rather than a kind of political or along the lines of race definitions that are becoming increasingly popular. He also talks about what it means to be a child of Ismail and what the Ismailian legacy is. He then goes into talking about religion in Britain and the decline of Christianity, and the kind of vacuum that's left in people's lives as a result of that, and the fact that Islam can provide a real alternative to some of the problems in modern Europe. He then goes in to talk about the Bosnian Genocide and the religious fervor that made this possible. And he then goes into talking about fearfulness and avoiding and kind of advising Muslims to avoid fearfulness and instead providing solutions that are authentic and confident. He also advises us to avoid anything that might be repulsive and instead invite people in and avoid extremism and kind of very non-accommodating interpretations. He then talks about how anger is neither a trait of God nor of his prophet, and that the solution is not to respond to evil with anger, but rather to be steadfast, and for solutions to be motivated by a sense of rida while acting on the commandments to heal the world. He then talks about the confusing kind of moral flux that we are in the modern world at the moment, and the fact that it's a land of denial, and that in order to respond with what is higher, we need to reclaim that natural sense of beauty and righteousness. And he kind of also goes into mentioning how the traditional arts can help us to regain that stillness and discipline that will help us to start to think along the right lines and rejuvenate us and allow us to spread this light so that we can expose others to it as well. And then the final chapter, he talks about the transformative power of zakah and the fact that zakah has a great financial potential to be able to change our condition quite drastically if we use it in the correct way. So that's a summary of the book, really providing an kind of scholarship-based approach to some of the challenges facing Muslims in modern Europe. What I took away from it most was that essentially these problems are quite big and there's no simple solution. You know, we have all kinds of people kind of claiming different solutions, different groups kind of coming and proclaiming one answer over others. But you've really got to sit down and go into the roots of the problem and try and sort them out from there. And we can't be, partisan. We have to really put all our emotions to the side and really try and think on and solve these problems at the root. And although I would say I perhaps found myself not necessarily agreeing with everything in the book, I think it did give me a good starting point to try and break down some of these quite complex problems and try and think about how we can solve them, because there's no point complaining. We need to be action focused. What did you guys take away from this book?
I completely agree with what you said at the end there about like that you didn't agree with everything, but you still like really enjoyed reading it. And I think that's such an important point, because we mentioned like a few weeks ago, and I think our interview with ZubsCovered will mention this again, just around the fact that you don't have to always read things you know you'll agree with, or read things that you know already say stuff you know. It's really important to kind of expose yourself to maybe other viewpoints, expose yourself to new information, kind of broaden your horizons in a way. And just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean you shouldn't understand it or try and kind of get that viewpoint from someone. And especially when it's like political issues or like really deep issues which were present in this book, there's not like one right answer, so it's so important to explore other people's point of view and kind of see what other people kind of say about the issue. My biggest takeaway from this was just like, well, I hadn't really thought about each of the issues explored in this book that deeply before, and the book goes in quite a lot of depth, so I just enjoyed reading it and I enjoyed getting like a different viewpoint. And again, I didn't agree with everything that was said in the book, but it was just really nice to kind of reflect on everything that was said in the book. And I would just like to say at this point as well that this text is quite heavy, so I would not recommend reading this maybe as like a passive read or reading this in one sitting, because I think after like maybe every little chunk of this book, you do need time to kind of just reflect on what's been said and kind of understand it. And it'd also be good if you had some background about politics in Europe, the world wars and those kind of like basic things before kind of approaching this book, because it's not like a basic read. It does require some background knowledge. However, despite saying that, it was an interesting read. So if you're interested in politics, if you're interested in maybe society and how society has kind of changed over the years and what's kind of going to happen next, and all the issues that are kind of going on in the media right now, I would really recommend that you pick up this text and give it a shot.
Yeah, I think like there's so many people talking about like Islam and politics, Islamophobia, and everyone seems to have like, you know, suggesting their own solution or their own strategy to kind of deal with it. And I think having like the way in this book how everything is broken down and kind of condensed into, you know, one system and one longitudinal view, it really gave me a lot of clarity about some of these issues that I was feeling a little bit confused about as well. So I found that really helpful, but I would really agree with what you said, that it's quite a heavy read. I don't think I would recommend it as a bedtime read, because I don't think we would have the required concentration at that time of the day to take this book in. What about you, Aisha? What did you get from reading this?
Yeah, just basically what you guys just dropped off there when you were saying how it's quite a heavy text. Because it is like, it does feel like you're reading a very academic text, and especially because you're kind of expecting that a little bit when you go in, so, since it does say it's a collection of essays. But yeah, it is very much information heavy at times. I thought it was really interesting just because of how it kind of values that need of like compassion as well. It takes a very like compassionate approach in some sense. But then it's also kind of like when you're reading it, you're like, okay, I understand, but it gives you that easy to say, but really difficult to do. But that just kind of is expected with like everything. When it comes to these very like contentious issues. But overall, I think, like Sherza also mentioned, if you're somebody who just wants to hear an approach to these very modern issues such as like Islamophobia and the position of Muslims in Europe, definitely read this text, because it will give you some insight and, like Ramaisa says, spur like some of your own interest in thinking how you would go about fixing these issues. But yeah, overall, just like a very interesting read, I would say.
Great. Yeah, I really agree that it really got me thinking, and you know, just to kind of keep up with everything that was going on in this book, I found it to be really useful to make a summary, just to keep track of everything going on. And I was really using the highlighting tool in my Kobo a lot, just to note down really key quotes. And I think we'll be talking about the e-readers versus paper copy debate later on in the show. But before that, I think we'll go on to our children's segment of the week. So this week, our children's book of the week is Agent Zeba Investigates.
Hi, I'm Mawahid, and this is Mawahid's Book Corner. This week I read Agent Zeba Investigates The Missing Diamonds by Annabelle Fahmy and illustrated by Daniela Sosa. The book is about Zeba and her friend Poppy and her little brother Ali, and the mystery of a dog's missing collar. The book takes place in the hotel her cousin's having her wedding, when suddenly a dog rushes into the hall, causing chaos. And the dog turned out to be owned by a celebrity, Maysoon, a famous singer and TV star. Agent Zeba and her companions track down the dog and give him back to the celebrity. But soon they realize that its collar is missing. The collar is a charm made out of diamonds, so it's kind of important. And it's up to Agent Zeba and her friends to find it. Agent Zeba, despite being a child, is obsessed with secret agents, and that's because she's obsessed with her aunt's work in the police investigation service in Pakistan as a detective secret agent. She's also obsessed with her mother's collection of Eden Lockett's books. Eden Lockett is the fictional spy who wrote books about her adventures. Agent Zeba is a Pakistani, and I found that rare that a Pakistani who still embraces their culture. Though I feel the author didn't really own it, and only a few mentions of her Pakistani heritage were fitted into the book. And to be honest, I wouldn't even know she was Pakistani apart from the small comments in the book and the front cover. I would recommend Agent Zeba for 7 to 9-year-olds, and for fans of the Secret 7 series and Enid Blyton. Though it was not one of my favorite books, it has a good mix of mystery and crime, and a good introduction for the genre to 7 to 9-year-olds.
Great, that was Moahid with this week's Children's Book of the Week. And even though we kind of explored Once Upon a Eid, which was a bit of a children's book, we still wanted to keep Moahid's segment in for like a more casual book that's not to do with like Ramadan or Eid. So that was our first half of the show. We talked about travelling home, we talked about Once Upon a Eid, and we did a really nice children's segment there as well. Remember to join us back in our second half of the show when we will talk about e-readers, audiobooks, paperbacks, what ones are good, what ones are bad, what are our opinions on them. And until then, please text us in. Tell us, do you like reading on paperback? Do you like reading on your e-reader? Or do you like reading through an audiobook? Is reading through an audiobook even reading? Please text us in on our WhatsApp number 07591 970 241. Or comment via Facebook or YouTube. The question of the week again this week was, how do you like reading? Through audiobooks, through paperbacks, or through your e-reader? And remember to join us after the break when we will talk to ZubsCovered, who's a Bookstagrammer and has a lot of followers on Instagram, about her experience in starting her Bookstagram account and how that's changed as she's grown and gained more followers. See you soon.
This is Ramadan 87.9 FM on your dial. From sunup to sundown, we'll be with you every step of the way.
Where there is extreme poverty, there are always orphaned and abandoned children. Every 2.2 seconds, a child loses a parent somewhere in the world. There are over 200 million orphaned children worldwide. Muslim Global Relief provides education to help orphan children develop the skills they need, making positive changes in their life and breaking them free from poverty. Awarded the UK's Best Muslim Charity of the Year. Make a 100% zakat donation. Visit muslimglobalrelief.org.
Come and visit us at Al Ansar and find fantastic deals on food and drink. At Al Ansar, we specialize in Asian groceries and HMC halal meat. We stock products from all over the world and have everything you need this Ramadan, from big packs of rice, flour and oil to dates, treats and snacks. You can find us at 153 Queens Way in Bletchley or call us on 01908 411 334.
German Doner Kebab wishes you Ramadan Kareem. Enjoy your doner after dusk with us and choose from the original Doner Kebab, the K-Cal, the Doner Crunch Burger, or perhaps the Boss Box and so much more. You can find your nearest GDK at GermanDonerKebab.com or bring the Ramadan experience to your doorstep by signing up for your Ramadan pack at RamadanTentProject.com. German Doner Kebab. Kebabs done right.
Ramadan Mubarak from Adam Accounting Services.
Ramadan Mubarak. Need help with your accounts and tax work?
Contact us today on 01908 692 380 and see how we can help.
Adam Accounting Services. Friendly local accountants. Call us today on 01908 692 380.
रहमत अजीम के मेहमान अस्सलाम कुरान के नज़ूल के सामान अस्सलाम रमज़ान अस्सलाम ए रमज़ान अस्सलाम अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मैं हूँ काशिफ रज़ा और मैं ला रहा हूँ उर्दू शो काशिफ रज़ा के साथ हर बुध की शाम 6 से 7 के दरमियान हर हफ्ते एक नए मेहमान के साथ जरूर शिरकत कीजिएगा। अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
The vibrant city of Lahore comes to Milton Keynes. Let's talk about the Lahori vibes, Corona lockdown and Ramadan in Lahore with Atif and Sadia.
Please join our live show every Thursday 7 to 8 p.m. on Ramadan FM Milton Keynes. You can also join our live stream on Facebook and YouTube.
For a list of all our sponsors, please visit RamadanFM.com.
Ramadan, 87.9 FM.
Welcome to the Ramadan Reading Retreat with Aisha, Rumaisa and Sherza.
Flip away from life's distractions, grab a cup of tea, and let's delve into this week's cozy conversations.
Come on in.
Welcome back, everyone, to Ramadan Reading Retreat. During the first half of our show, we kind of explored Travelling Home, which is a book, and our other book of the week, our other book of the week, Once Upon a Eid, which is a series of short stories for children about Eid and celebrations. During this half, we will talk about e-readers, audiobooks, paperbacks, what ones we prefer, what the debate is and what's kind of going on. And we'll also hear our exclusive interview from ZubsCovered about her journey to become a bookstagrammer. Before the break, I asked you all, well, how do you like to read? Do you like reading through paperbacks, through audiobooks, or through an e-reader? And we've gotten a lot of responses in, so I'll just share some of them. A lot of people did kind of want to stick with the physical copies. We had physical copies only, physical books, physical copies all the way. But we also had some audiobooks, which I thought was interesting because I never thought of audiobooks as being that popular. But we had a few people who like reading through audiobooks because they like to paint at the same time, or they like doing other activities and allows them to do both things at the same time. We had one e-reader, and that's quite interesting because we'll be exploring that further. Someone's commented through Facebook as well, and they've said, I never liked reading, but got into it during lockdown. I prefer reading on screen because I'm the new generation, and that's from Faisal. Thanks for that comment, Faisal. And since this whole show today is about reading in the modern age, I think that is really relevant. And we've had a few more, but we'll kind of delve into them later. I'll pass it on to Aisha now, who will introduce our guests for this week's show.
Okay, so a few weeks ago we carried out an interview with a bookstagrammer who goes by the username @ZubsCovered. So up next we are just going to play a clip from that interview where you guys can hear all about her thoughts on what it means to be reading in the digital age and being a modern reader. So yeah, we're going to play that clip for you guys.
Jazakallah khair for having me here today. It's quite an honour. About me, so as Aisha said, I'm a bookstagrammer based in London, which basically means that I like to talk about books on my little corner of the internet on Instagram. I've had it for about 2.5 years now. Started it because I wanted something to help me cope and deal with the loss of my mum. And books and writing I've always found quite cathartic to me, And funnily enough, I didn't actually read for about 7-8 years. I mean, I got married and I started a family, etc. So I was super, super busy. But I lost my mum and I was just seeping into depression, and I needed an outlet. I needed an outlet where I wasn't around people, where I wasn't speaking to people, but I was just kind of like in my own cocoon, but away from my reality. And that's what books do. They offer you that escapism. And so I started reading again. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. Apart from that, I am an English teacher. I teach Key Stage 3 English, which is primarily Year 7, 8 and 9. I do support with GCSE content as well. I do freelance copywriting, which means I've written content for sort of property magazines and websites, etc. I'm also a mama to 3 boys. Alhamdulillah, I have an 11-year-old going on 20. I have an 8 and a 5-year-old. So yeah, super busy. Alhamdulillah.
And you still manage to fit in so much. Like, that's just brilliant with how much that you have going on. So let's just start things off with a quite easy question. What are you currently reading? And then I'll share what I'm currently reading as well. Just geeking out about books.
During Ramadan, I intend to read obviously books on faith, etc. I just feel like this month comes once a year, and I should dedicate that time to books about stories from the Prophet and the Sahaba, peace be upon him, etc. So before that, I'm trying to get my quota of thrillers completed. So I'm on a bit of a thriller binge at the moment. So it's like literally back-to-back thrillers. I've just finished Little Secrets, which was pretty good. I finished The Mother-in-Law, which was about a twisted mother-in-law who wouldn't move. Yeah, it was pretty great. I finished an advanced reader copy for Beth O'Leary. She's the author of The Flat Share. She's got a new road trip, and it's fantastic. I finished that as well. So yeah, I'm just like tying up my loose ends at the moment before my month of sort of respite.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. So I've been reading Radio Silence. It's by Alice Oseman, and a lot of people were recommending that, and I was like, do you know what, I need to try to get a few more books in before, like you said, it comes to Ramadan. And you do want to focus more on spiritual and just like informative books about Islam, just to make you feel like, okay, this is a month where I can really dedicate myself to this topic. So yeah, also, like, how do you prefer reading? Like, are you more of a I like physical books and I will only read physical books, or are you like, I love an e-reader, I love like both?
Well, initially, I love the feel of actually. I mean, who doesn't like the feel of holding a book, whether it's a paperback or a hardback? Obviously, paperback's much more easier, but because of how busy my life has become, I need to kind of fit in my reading in any way that I can. So I'm a huge audiobook fan as well. And I know there's an argument at the moment of whether audiobooks are considered actual reading. I'm totally against that. Of course they are, because it's actually more difficult to comprehend an audiobook. You've got to kind of train your mind to shut off your surroundings and just fully focus. I remember the first audiobook I listened to, it was a non-fiction book called Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. And I had to listen to chapter 1 at least 7 times because I just couldn't, I would be listening to it and then my mind will kind of just wander, and I'll be listening out for the kids or doing this, etc. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks as well. I do read on my Kindle. It's so much more easier. I'm developing like carpal tunnel syndrome in my hands now from constantly holding books, typing, and content creating, etc. So it helps to have a Kindle device as well, where it's just propped up against some pillows and I'm literally just swiping across. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a preference. I have a preference in depending on the moment that I'm in, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. I'm actually like the same. I've never been like anti-reading online, just because, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this as well. There's so many platforms that allow you to read online, like with Wattpad, and there's like Webtoon as well. So like reading on your phone
and you're just able to do it anywhere, and that kind of like takes it away. And there's so much, like they can hold so many books. And I find it so interesting that you're getting into audiobooks as well, because I've yet to get into them, and I'm like trying to find like the perfect time to be like, okay, like let's just try one out. Especially because, like you said, it's not this passive activity, it's just as engaging as reading. Like you really need to be tuned in, you don't miss anything.
To be honest, more. You've got to see now. I think I'm like, well, Audible tells me I'm a ninja. You know, it's bad because I like running, and I'm in the kitchen cooking, and I'm cleaning my home, or I'm walking to work, and I feel like if I wasn't listening to audiobooks, I wouldn't be hitting my quota for my reading. So it's like killing two birds with one stone. I'm doing what I need to do, but I'm also listening to a book as well, so I'm not really missing out. For those of you guys who don't listen to audiobooks, I would highly recommend them. They are great, especially e-reading as well. I know there's lots of platforms right now, but if you want to get into book reviewing or create a Bookstagram account just to talk about books, or if you just want to read new books that are not even published yet, like advanced reader copies, we call them ARCs, then create a NetGalley account. So NetGalley is a platform as well, and you go in there and you just write a little bit about yourself, and you can literally just request books directly from the publisher. Sometimes they'll say no. I get told no as well. I do, honestly. And but it's a great way to read up and coming titles conveniently, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's great. We will link NetGalley in the description as well. That would be such a great resource for a lot of people that are interested in reading and in reading ARCs as well. So now that you were saying about your quota, you've gained like quite a significant audience on Bookstagram. Do you think that's kind of changed your relationship with what you read and how you read as well?
Oh gosh, it's difficult not to let it kind of affect you, and it does. You need to be quite careful with social media, and not just with a Bookstagram account. You know, as your account grows, you know, you tend to think, oh, let me just do this, or let me do this certain niche that these people like. But you've also got to stay true to yourself, because these people came on your account with you as 100% organic. So stick to what you are and stick to how true you are. There was a period, I think last year, when I was only reading and reviewing publisher sent books, and it made me very unhappy, because that's not what I wanted to do, you know. Yeah. Now, I mean, unless I specifically say that yes, I will feature your book, or featuring it's okay. It's just a click of an image and posting it, but reviewing it, unless I specifically say to a publisher, yes, I will review your book, I don't. And I'm very much a mood reader. I read what I want, you know. And I feel like, yes, alhamdulillah, I have amassed a massive following, but I feel like those people are there because of what I was posting before. It was not a pretense, you know.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like they want to know what you're reading rather than what you feel like you have to read. And I feel like with your page, I've been following you for quite some time too, and I just really enjoy just seeing like the variety of what you read. It's not restricted to one genre or one form. It's just this like constant fun, and it helps me decide like, okay, maybe I'll try this out, maybe I'll try that out, because I'm like quite a random reader. Like I'll just read whatever.
I think random readers are the best one, because you're not conforming yourself to one sort to a box or to a genre to say that, you know what, I'll only read this. You're open to different sort of experiences, and you know, you do. I mean, you know, being a reader yourself, that as soon as you start reading a few lines, you get this image in your mind, and you start creating this world just based on the author's words, and you're traveling. You know, I created this reel. It's on my page at the moment, and basically captioned it, and I said, when people ask me why do I read, and it was literally like different snapshots of like different parts of the world and different things, like events that have happened. And that's why I read, because I get to just sit in my home, but I'm traveling and I'm learning and I'm expanding myself. So yeah, it's great to be a mood reader.
Yeah. So with the online community now that you're in, and it's centered on reading, and it's really thriving, and there's just a lot of opportunity for collaboration and just simply making friends with other Bookstagrammers. Do you have any like experiences or moments that have stood out to you that feel like, okay, this is why I'm really enjoying doing this, because of this way that I felt like this little community.
I think one thing that I get really happy about is that my account, it just kind of grew organically. You know, I wasn't trying to fast track it or anything. So when I started my account initially, it was just to find some peace, to just kind of shut off from my reality and just go onto a space where nobody knows me or nobody knows what I've been through, and just talk books. And then I think it was Quercus Publishers who invited me to the book launch for the Flatshare at Waterstones in Piccadilly. And they had literally built an entire scene from the book on the first floor. And I think that was a massive wow moment for me. And I thought to myself, you know what, I could really do something with this.
Okay, so we just heard from ZubsCovered. I hope you guys enjoyed that little snippet, and a big jazakallah to Zubs for taking part. And this really gives us a perfect segue into our discussion. So you guys must have heard that Zubs mentioned her audiobook and e-reader reading habits. So I have a little bit of insider information about how the three of us feel towards e-readers, but when it comes to audiobooks, I'm unaware. So I'd just love to hear what Ramaisa and Shares think about audiobooks.
So I've tried to read or listen to an audiobook a couple of times, but I just find that it's not ideal for me. I think sometimes the voice of the voice actor can be really distracting. Sometimes they're really over dramatic, or sometimes their accent is, not one that I'm so familiar with. So I start to think about their accent rather than. So I'm essentially thinking of them as a person reading rather than, just allowing myself to get absorbed in the book. And I also feel like the world is so noisy, we're so busy, that these moments of silence that we have are actually quite special. Those are the times when we have to channel our own thoughts and just to kind of process what's been going on. And I think sometimes, those moments of silence when you're just washing the dishes or something, that's when you get some of your best ideas. So I don't like to try and, keep my ears going with things all the time. But I have found my dad has an app called Blinkist, and it provides short summaries of books in audio format. So you can listen to a summary of a book in around 5-10 minutes. So I have found that really useful just to listen to sometimes in the car. What about you, Sherza? Do you have any experience of audiobooks?
Yeah, so I actually have a friend who really likes audiobooks, and she really encouraged me to download Audible and kind of give it a shot. I kind of got through the first chapter, and then the thing was I kind of didn't listen to it. When I was maybe driving, I forgot to actually pay attention to the words, so I had to keep replaying that one chapter. And I think it's because to me, listening sometimes is quite a passive thing, but if I'm sitting there with a book, I know I'll pay attention to it. So that was part of the problem for me with audiobooks. The other issue with audiobooks for me is that once I read something, I do like thinking a bit about it. And when someone else's voice is in my ears, I can't think with my own little voice in my own head. So that was another thing that kind of put me off. But listening to that interview from Zubs and getting those messages in of people saying they really love audiobooks, I do understand why. And it's all to do with the fact that we're so busy. So just having maybe an audiobook on is a way to read without needing to get a book out. So maybe if you're on the subway, or maybe if you're driving, you can't just pick up a book while you're driving and start reading. So it is a good alternative if you need if you kind of want to finish a story and stuff as well. I also really liked your point there, Maisa, about all the different voices, and it's so true. Once someone's maybe too enthusiastic when reading a book, or if they're reading quite slowly, it can be a bit irritating as well. And I think it's just because we're so used to our own little voices in our own heads reading. It's so strange to have maybe someone else reading in your head. And I want to put out the same question to our listeners. What do you think about audiobooks? Do you feel it is reading? And I thought that was really funny, because it's something that I used to think about a lot, but now thinking back, why do we feel the need to classify things like that? Why does it have to be reading or not reading? Why can't it just be engaging with a book? Does it make it less valid? of course it doesn't. We're not reading snobs and we're here. But yeah, that's my opinion on audiobooks. Maybe I will give them another try once I go back into commuting and back into busy pre-lockdown life, post-lockdown, to try and kind of fit reading into my schedule again.
Yeah, and of course in, traditional societies, books were very hard to come by, and all the stories that they shared were primarily through the oral tradition. And, people memorizing and sharing books that, stories that took hours and hours to narrate. So I suppose we should really be asking, is reading the right way to get a story, or should we all be listening to audiobooks?
I think you guys just what you guys said really made me think that like Once Upon an Eid would make such a good audiobook if they had like little the children respective of those ages and the stories like reading out the stories and really interacting it, and that way you can like get a little CD or like put it in your car. I don't know if people still do that obviously, but like yeah, audiobook and play it in your car and stuff. I just think that'd be really fun for kids. Totally random, but also like what you guys said about like pace and like tone and like just voice, it can really throw you off. Because like Sherry said, you're just so used to the little voice in your head reading. So now when it's suddenly someone else, I can feel really like awkward as well because you're like, a bit fragile too. Okay, so that was our little audiobook kind of summary. Now let's move on to like versus like e-readers versus like physical books. So a little bit of background information. All three of us have e-readers, and me and Sherza were heavily inspired by Ramaisa to get e-readers. And we were like asking her for like details, or like, when do you have? Like how long have you had it? And it really pushed us to be like, okay, let's just finally get them and see how they are. So let me hear your guys' Sherza and Ramaisa's thoughts first about their e-reading experience, and we can have Sherza and me are like the newbie e-readers, and Ramaisa's like our seasoned veteran.
Yes, so as Aisha mentioned before, kind of hearing that Ramaisa had an e-reader, I was so against e-readers, and like thinking back now, I don't know why. I don't know why I had this random beef against e-readers. But yeah, before like knowing Ramaisa had an e-reader, I was really against them, and it's because like we're on screens all day. I just wanted to pick up a book, and I didn't realize like that e-readers actually looked like a book. Like they always say in the ads, but I guess maybe I have some trust issues with adverts on TV. I never believed them, but they actually look like a book. And I really recommend, if you've not seen an e-reader, to look at it, because it was such a wow moment for me. And as someone who has quite a lot of technology, it's quite funny that I was impressed by something that's so like simple. But yeah, like that completely blew me away. But before like knowing Ramaisa had an e-reader, I was really against them. And then Ramaisa saying she had an e-reader was like such a turning point for me, because Ramaisa's actually in the year above me in medical school, and I always just look up to Ramaisa. And when she said, I was like, oh my god, like if Ramaisa has an e-reader, like they're not bad, like there must be something like really good and I need to try it. So I got an e-reader and it completely like changed my viewpoint. Like I love my e-reader. I love the fact that I can have all my books in kind of one place. I can take it with me. It saves storage. It looks like a book. It's just great. You can like highlight on it without like messing up your book, and then if you highlight the wrong bit, you can unhighlight it, and I just really love it. But since like our whole show today is about like reading the modern age, for the last 4 minutes, I really do want to get Ramaisa's point of view. As Aisha mentioned, she's the one that's kind of always had an e-reader, about like what she thinks, what are the pros and cons for like the last 4 minutes or so before we wrap up our show for today.
So I've had an e-reader for, I think, almost 8 years. So I really am an e-reading veteran. But I think I was in the same shoes as Sherza, in that, I thought, e-reader doesn't seem like a real book. It's just a, technological gimmick, and, it'll take away from the reading experience. But I got an e-reader as a gift, so I guess I was forced to use it. But since having it, I've been so grateful to my friends who bought me that as a birthday gift. I think it's really made reading a lot easier, and it's really changed my relationship with reading in a really positive way as well. The fact that you can just go online on your library's website, and with a few clicks of a button, download so many books for free that get downloaded directly onto your e-reader, and you can read them to your heart's delight. I think, that's just really incredible. And, I think as we get older, we start to use our local libraries less and less. And we get busier as well. So just being able to download them, directly at home is really a big blessing. And I'm actually a member of like 3 or 4 different council libraries. So if I can't find a book I'm looking for on the website of one library, I just go and check at a different library. And it's really convenient in terms of, transport. Sometimes when I'm, like, for example, commuting on the train or on my bicycle, it's much easier to just pop my e-reader in my bag, which only weighs a few grams rather than a book or 2. And again, with the e-reader, there's just one e-reader and you can access your whole collection of however many books you have. Whereas if you were taking them in person, you could probably only take 1 or 2 books with you wherever you were going. But I would say there may be a few disadvantages to having an e-reader as well. There is nothing that can replace that feeling of having a real physical book in your hands, especially if it's a really beautiful one, like some of the books we were describing last week. And sometimes I do feel I read a lot slower on the e-reader, and I can't mark the pages in a physical way as I could with a sticker or by highlighting. But I have been hearing from Sherzan and Aisha when we were speaking earlier that the e-reader technology has really advanced in those 8 years, and now there's great like note management and highlight management systems like embedded into the e-readers. So I would really recommend an e-reader to anyone who does read a lot. Not perhaps as a replacement for real books, but as something to go alongside your physical books. And I think we'll just end with a short poem about e-reading and the kind of development of reading in the digital direction. So this is a poem by Elaine Equi called "The Libraries Didn't Burn." The libraries didn't burn, despite books kindled in electronic flames. The locket of bookish love still opens and shuts. But its words have migrated to a luminous elsewhere, neither completely oral nor written, a somewhere in between. Then will oak, willow, birch, and olive poets return to their digital tribes. Trees wander back to the forest. Thank you for listening this week, and inshallah see you guys next week for our final show, where we will be discussing amplifying the Muslim voice, and we'll have interviews from Muslim writers. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
You are listening to Ramadan